Hi.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Good, good. How does it feel to be a top new release on Amazon?
I didn't know I was, so it feels really great.
You didn't know you were?
No, I check every once in a while, but it's like, it kind of pops up. So,
Yeah, okay, okay. So yeah, if right now if you go on Amazon and you type in Spiritually Parented by Meg, you will get this beautiful banner that says top new release. So that's awesome. Huge congrats.
woo, thank
Yay!
you. Thank you.
Amazing. Yes. It's you are number 7 in dancing reference.
Sounds
Which
important.
which we're going to have to ask you about because I didn't, for those of you who are just joining, I have worked with Meg in the past. Hannah has too. And now we're talking about her new book, Spiritually Parented, which is a top new release on Amazon. Yay! And we have a couple of questions that we wanted to ask also, but just a few that we got from readers too, which we're really excited about, yeah, sharing with you.
Yeah.
Um, so to start off with, do you just want to kind of give a little bit of a background about what Spiritually Parented is? It also has a really special connection for you with your mother, and that's what a lot of readers really praise. So I'll give you a second to let you kind of tell people about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I've got it beside me, of course. So the front cover is this.
Beautiful.
Thank you. It's this photo of my mom and I when I'm younger. And then the subtitle, which is A Foot in Both Worlds. So it's a mixture of both my mom and I's story and what it was like to grow up studying shamanism as a family, and ultimately feeling like I have this connection with the spiritual realm and the human realm. And sometimes humaning is very hard, and I would rather be kind of in the energetic and spiritual realm. But then at the same time, knowing that the way that we connect and ground is through the body and being in this experience of being a person. So it's that kind of carrying both and.
Yeah, 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 that's amazing. And what's really powerful too is there's some chapters about guided meditation as well, and then you also mention dancing, and you just really get that mind, spirit, body connectivity. So can you talk about like how your background in dance influenced that kind of those three core concepts really that you explore in your book?
Yeah, for sure. First off, it's exciting to see people here with us.
Yeah, hi everybody.
Yay! I did light a candle just to hold space. So that's kind of part of this as well, is just like connecting with the elements, connecting with earth, air, fire, and water through the medicine wheel, but also that corresponds with different parts of our personhood. So it connects with our body, our mind, our spirit, and our emotions. So with all of that in this kind of spiritual context, again, it's like that integration piece. So I started dancing when I was 11, and being in the body is both extremely challenging and really freeing and releasing and beautiful. So it's kind of, I share some of this background of movement and dance, of being in dance classes, and kind of feeling like I was enjoying what we were doing, but missing some of the debrief or the connection or the communal component. And then when the communal component was there, there wasn't often an embodiment component. So it's kind of like I personally started to fill in the holes for myself. And that kind of led to creating that in the world as well, like wanting to bring people into that journey. And I think so many entrepreneurs and people who are on their own path are looking for what did we wish existed when we were younger? Like, I'm guessing that that's also part of your own business model and what you want to help authors do because of your own experience. Maybe not having that support or not having like a path forward. So it's that kind of thing where I kind of looked around to see, oh, these are these different components and pieces of my own life, but ultimately it's also about moving that forward and creating space for other people too.
Right, right. Wow, that's amazing. And that's probably why you're starting to see praise on your book about just this openness and this willingness to be vulnerable. You even talk about how you have these moments where you're kind of like, am I that weird kid? Do I have kind of these oddities, or, just the little quirky things that make us who we are?
Yeah.
But you said that you had a really special connection with your family, who really embraced and kind of nurtured what you would call those weirder parts of you. Can you talk a little bit about how you think that's shaped who you are, and also how readers might come upon that in reading Spiritually Parented?
Yeah, for sure. So part of it is I felt like my mom really created space for me in the world. And so she not only like embraced my weirdness or, gifts on a personal front in our house, but then started to create sacred spaces and ceremony when she started teaching as well. So the reason that I talk about growing up this way and why it's called Spiritually Parented instead of like spiritual parenting is because it's not a book about parenting. It's my experience of having this intuitive and sacred space at home, which I find in like working as a coach, working as a healer, working with clients. Often the people who come to me were like invalidated or shamed or had that part of themselves squished out of them. Like it was not upheld in their home. They were either told they were weird or to be quiet, or that's improper or inappropriate to talk about, those kind of things. And so then as an adult, it's like they've gone through some of that dark night of the soul journey and are coming out the other side and are looking for what those gifts and what it would be like to live your life in alignment and congruence with those pieces that often other people don't understand. So that leads to kind of this understanding of weirdness within my own family and a lot of like normalizing certain things that other people do think are weird or like aren't experiencing at home, talking about, auras and, 1 second, I just spilled my tea. It's going to be really fun. All right, just to keep it interesting. All right. But yeah, so this connection to weirdness inside of me that also I feel like is inside of other people. And now as adults, we call them certain things, like we call them spiritual gifts or we call them quirks, or you're like, oh, my friend is so good at that thing. She always knows exactly what to say. Whereas as children or growing up in more mainstream society, people don't necessarily get it, or that's like often what we're made fun of for, I would say.
Yeah, one thing I read in your author's note, you mentioned how your mom, was a therapist at one point, and you guys had this dream together to co-write this book together. And I think that just shows how much that you say that you had these experiences and what it was like growing up with a parent who was kind of more self-aware of just connection with mind, body, soul. And I think that I think that you can really tell by how you say in this book, like it's not a how-to book. It's just shared experiences of what it was like for you growing up with that, and what many would consider to be a benefit to have somebody who does consider your thoughts, feelings, and doesn't tell you to hide every emotion. Right. So that was another really positive review that we saw. I think some people really appreciated kind of the rarity of this situation. Yeah. And I came up with, like, when I was reading that, I thought about something that we discuss a lot, being identical twins, is that whatever, normal is, whatever you want to call it or identify it as, Hannah was always better at fitting into that than I was. And not saying like Hannah just like bends and folds and whatever. Hannah she's very good at kind of like reading the room and diving in. And I'm like, no, like partition, like kind of thing. So it's interesting to hear somebody say, like, okay, these are the little weird things about my kid. Like, how do we embrace those? How do we encourage those? And I think that was something, I mean, when we were growing up, that still wasn't being talked about. So did you ever have these experiences where maybe you felt you were having these conversations, you were being kind of nurtured in these areas that other people just weren't even discussing, weren't even scratching the surface of?
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because, you know, part of my, I don't even know if I would say this, but like job in life is like reading people and checking in, right? And in our current landscape, a lot of the words that go along with that can actually be about like trauma focus or trauma informed or hypervigilance. And so like even as you say that about the two of you, like I know that I've gotten to know you a little bit, and so I see both the like adaptability that Hannah brings, and then Haley, as you step out, like there's always that thing about like what is the gift of the outsider, like what is the gift of the person who can't fit in. And I use the metaphor in my book, but the phrase that's been used against me and probably other people is that square peg in a round hole, right? And you just like you, it doesn't matter how much you try and force it, it just never fits, right? And so I think there's both and.
I know. I was like, wow. We were both kind of like, okay. That's the writer in her. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I just felt very understood. I just had like, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I think I felt like I was having a Hallmark moment. I know, we were like all the feel goods. Like I was just like, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Of course. Yeah, so two things come to mind that are definitely like interlocking parts of my own identity growing up, and then also the pieces that are not necessarily understood or lifted up in the world, but were lifted up at home. For me was this part of my family, right? So I have lesbian moms and I have this big gay family, and I'm very proud of it. And I've always been very proud of it. And so having that family and growing up like that, there was always this sense of normalcy around gayness and queerness, which for me, the reason that I write really specifically in the book about it is the idea that it's part of my life, but it's not all of my life. It's not like my whole identity, but it is an identifying factor. And so I just grew up with like gay people being wonderful and normalized. And so I didn't have any shame about it growing up. And I really did just like walk through the world with like, I'm 100% proud of my family at all times, and I'm so excited. And let me tell you about my moms in kindergarten. And, you know, like, that's so awesome. The rest of the world was not necessarily having those conversations. And so I don't know exactly why. I think there's that blend of nature and nurture personality, and then also what was being taught at home. But it was all about love, right? Like it was this idea of being loved even though you're not the norm. And so that's a lot of the space that I find that I hold for myself and for other people, is those parts of ourselves that we're taught you shouldn't talk about this, you shouldn't be vulnerable, you shouldn't whatever, that all of that is kind of taking over. Like it's like being blasted at us by a megaphone, and then our choice is how we respond to that. And so in that sense, like the world was not going, oh, I'm so happy you're the child of lesbians, tell me more. Like that was not what was happening at elementary school. But as I've gotten older, that is some of what's happening, both with the culture change and shift, you know, internationally. But yeah, so I think of that space of a lot of people were not necessarily safe at home, and they kind of went out and found family and people who got it. And I had the opposite experience, where my external world of public school education and stuff like that was harder for me to negotiate and fit in and navigate than it was at home, which was much more like embracing and kind. Yeah.
You should seriously write. Not that you're like, I just wrote a book. I was like, more. I promise you, it's such a good thing though. You've accomplished your job as an author when somebody else is already requesting another book from you. Yeah. Aww. And I just think that something, just in the first conversation I had with you, it was just this accessibility about you. It was that everything you were saying, had anybody else said it to me, it would have sounded very complicated. It might have even sounded like scientific, and that's something that people keep talking about in your book, is that it's refreshing, it's calming, it is accessible. And so I think that ideas and your spiritual journey and just your background could lend itself really well to a YA book. What do you think about that?
Oh, interesting.
Even if you like created your own teenager
idea.
who grew up like with the parents you had, and I just like that's amazing. And think about what that could do as well for queer kids too, you know, like what book were we trying to read? Hannah and I realized very early our sexuality. We realized very early like our kind of like sexuality. Like we knew like queerness was there.
Yeah.
And so it was so weird to just find that didn't exist in books. Like we read so many books growing up, and that just wasn't a thing. Or if it was the story. It never was it shown to exist
as
naturally.
Normalcy. Yeah, it was always the big reveal is that is that so and so is gay or you know, but it's just so you know, it is kind of refreshing, especially I mean for where we live. I think it's like we still have some pretty unsure people, but for the most part we live near Purdue University, you know, so we're around college students, and the younger crowd I think is sometimes a little more accepting of that, just because like you said, I think we've been around it more. But it's interesting to have somebody who's known it their whole life and be so
like I think that would be a really powerful thing for YA readers to see just a completely, because it's not done, like a completely confident, organic queer kid who has parents who are like, you're amazing and you're fantastic, and you know, I just think that's
or it's still so rare that, you know, we have to like kind of think of show, book, or movie where where it's normal, where the whole story or their whole identity, as you said earlier, isn't being a gay family or being raised by gay parents.
Right. I always think of the show Schitt's Creek. Are you familiar with that? It was never this big reveal that David was queer or anything, and it was never like something that the people in the town talked about or like had a conversation. It was just not even accepted, because it doesn't have to be. It just existed, and that's how they knew David.
Yeah, like even there's one time where his dad's describing it. I'm sorry, our dog found her toy with the speaker. But there's one time where David's dad even says he's talking about his son, and he's like, my son loves everybody. Like he's never like he's gay or he's just my son loves everybody,
and
like,
just so proud of it. And so I just think that not only your ability to show a teen with that kind of confidence, but also just to show the parents, you know, nurturing and encouraging, you know, the whatever this person wants to be. I think that's so empowering. So that was a question actually from a couple of readers was, you know, you wrote this book on spirituality and calming and meditation and growth and just all of these really like positive kind of feelings. Is that how you felt as you wrote this book, or were you able, or did you kind of sink into some tough feelings? I feel like reprocessing some of this, and just anytime we expose ourselves vulnerably
to grief specifically, I'm getting towards that part in your book now, and I do think anyone who has experienced any type of grief, it's so, I'm fangirling a little bit, but I have to say one thing that's crazy to me about your book is how individualized it feels at times, because you feel like you're like it's, but sorry.
Like Meg is talking to Hannah.
Like Meg is talking to Hannah, like spiritually parented for you, Hannah.
Yes, and Hannah reparenting herself. Like, that's how we were just reading passages back and forth today, and I was like, reparenting, like, okay, how can I reparent this?
But it's also so what's the word I'm looking for? It's also anyone can find something and relate to it or feel joy from it, or be like, hey, I've been there, I felt this exact same way. So it does feel so individualized, but it also feels that it can speak to anyone and everyone. So I think that was very well done. And like I said, one review literally said, thank you, Meg, for writing this piece. And I kind of felt the same way, because like I said, I felt like you were speaking to me, but I also was like, this would really help so-and-so, or that's maybe why so-and-so acted this way at that time, and that's why I felt this way, and why didn't I check in with myself? And and so it was just like sometimes reading your writing, I think, feels like a form of self-care.
So was
Put
it? Did
that
it
on
feel
a banner.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Spiritually parented is self-care.
Yes. Quote me.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it's funny because it's one of those things where every question, can kind of blossom into 1,000 directions. So I'm going to
It's also
try and
funny when I ask a question and then our twin brain Hannah's like, and then on top of that.
yeah, no, I get it though. I get it and I love it.
Sorry,
So
like
so this I can go back to Haley's question, this piece about kind of how it felt writing the book.
Yeah.
So some people who maybe are more familiar with my journey, I've been sharing some behind the scenes with my pre-sale supporters. And one of the things that is true about this is that this is the third time I have tried to write this book. So what I mean by that is I tried once on my own and I started crying every day and had to stop and do trauma therapy to try and get through that. And then I had to stop and take a break from writing. The second time that I started writing it, I joined a grief memoir group that was really amazing, but we were also just surrounding each other with each other's grief and trauma stories. And I was like, this is a lot. So that was the second time. And that was 5 years after my mom passed. And then this is the third time. And now it's been 11 years this year. So it was 10 years last year when I started writing the book. And so there's this big sense of I have entered and exited this process several times, and I really needed to find a structure of support that would work for me, both of my own healing process and the actual writing of it. And one of the pieces that shifted in the writing is originally I was just writing about my mom and I's journey, and a big part of her journey is that she had cancer. And so she had cancer 3 times in my life, once when I was 9, once when I was 18, and then the last time when I was 23. And so those are very, different ages and pivotal times. And one time she got surgery, one time she did chemo and radiation, the other time she didn't. And so it was just her health journey that also kickstarted her own spiritual journey was a big part of it sounds weird to say this, but the plot lines in my own life of how she and I, my mom and I really loved each other. And there's this single parent, only child bond. I do have, like I said, I have lesbian moms, but my other mom lives in North Georgia. So they lived 2 hours apart my whole life. And so also had this kind of alternative non-nuclear family growing up. But just that image that I always have about my mom is when she was sick at the very end, we would hold hands to fall asleep almost every night. And it's just this very intense, deep, hard thing to go through, right? So I was her primary caregiver, and all of that to say is that I originally was writing so much about just that part of my life, but I knew when I entered this third time of writing this book, I was I do not want to write a grief book, my first book. That can be later, but I want there to be a balance between the grief and all of these other pieces of my life. So kind of how you're saying that it talked to you specifically, Hannah, that's so sweet to me, because one of the things that is so important to me is that I did want to write about all of these different experiences and perspectives so that there is a piece that people will kind of hold on to or resonate with that will be very different than someone else. And that's what I'm really enjoying about getting people's reviews, is somebody will be like, oh my gosh, this chapter spoke to me so much, or this piece was so resonant, and they're totally different, which is really fun, rather than just this one thing that everybody is attracted to. So that makes me feel good as a writer, and as this piece of me that that I did want to share a lot of different aspects and range throughout my life. So.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm currently, you discuss grief in your book, and you talk about co-writing in a way with this book with your mom, and So I have to say, you know, I'm one of those readers that reads the author's note, the dedication. I don't know what it is about me. Maybe this is where I get crazy, but I like to read the chapter names. If there's a table of contents, I do. I like to do that. But
I do all that too. I mean, maybe that's the author of me that's like, somebody took the time to write this.
Let's see what I have to say. Right. Yeah.
So I will say, you know, I was flipping through your book last night, and your dedication says, "Mom, we did the thing."
Yeah.
That gives me chills.
It gave me chills as well. So I just I wanted to know how that feels. I mean, in a way, you kind of just discussed that, but I mean, not just to be done with the process, but to do something that you and your mom discussed doing your whole life.
Yeah. Well, and even as I was just saying, as a writer, I just felt myself be like, oh my gosh, it's true.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you know, because I think, yeah, there's that. Yeah, like there's a thing that we can hold in our hands that we wrote, and especially nowadays with internet, where you kind of put things and then it blasts off into the ethers. Like, it's very different to be like, this thing that is tangible, right, that I get to hold on to. Yeah, so I can tell a short story about the dedications. So the piece that says, "Mom, we did a thing," the reason I wrote that, and I love it, is that when I was in high school and I was applying to colleges, I was writing, you know, your college essay, and, you know, you're writing and trying to be unique and all this different stuff. And in my first line of my essay, I said something about like, the thing is, blah, 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 blah. And my mom looked at it and she goes, absolutely not. You cannot use that language to apply to college. And I was like, but it's true. Like, this is within, right? Like, this is what I want to talk about. And she was like, no. And so since then, using the word "thing" is like a joke between us. So if she was here, she would be like kind of pissed off about it, which also makes me happy just to have this moment of like, well, I couldn't do it, you know, in college, but I sure can do it in my first published book. So
I read my own damn book.
Yeah, so that's like part of the energy behind that there's both like the recognition and acknowledgement, and the, you know, the "we" is really important there. Like, I talk about that before coming on to this live. I had a moment where I was like, oh God, am I gonna cry? Like, is that, you know, just because there is so much about my mom and there is so much about grief.
Right.
And one of the pieces is that we really did want to write this together. And so there are moments that I would breathe and light a candle and kind of call her in and ask, or I would write for a while and then I would ask for her to chime in, and I would be like, well, what do you think about this? Or like, what's your perspective? Or what do you want to add? Because even though she's passed, we have a very close relationship. And one of the pieces that's like also funny about that to me is I went to like a channeling event once, which is not like, I am very woo-woo, but my woo is very specific. And so this is not quite my woo, but in this channeling event, I kind of got called on and I asked a question about my mom and something. And the woman goes, oh my gosh, she has so much to say. And I was like, yes, she does. She's like, she is not quiet. I was like, no, she is not. Like, she is, she is very present. And so I actually, like, I think in my grief journey also have had some of the opposite of other people, where when somebody's like, your person is with you, your person is, you know, and I just have to be like, you know, I get that you're trying to say something nice right now.
Yeah.
But that's not actually good for me. Like, my mom and I have such a strong relationship that I actually early on decided, like, you can come in when I invite you in, versus you're just around all the time and you're in my heart. And like, it just, I get it. I get why people say that. I get why people feel that. But it's important to me to be able to continue to like live my life on this planet and be earthside, earthbound, that the energetic is not just taking over all the time.
Yeah, and see, I think that can even speak to people who, you know, sometimes are frustrated or feel kind of like not thought of when somebody says, oh, well, you know, as long as you pray to God every day and God's with you, you know, and you're like, you know, I appreciate that you are religious and practice religion, but, you know, maybe the person you said that to doesn't. And you're like, so in a way that just makes them feel awkward or more in distress than they already felt. So yeah, I get what you're saying. It's like,
And I think that's important to how you discuss grief in your book, is that again, it's something that isn't as simple as kind of like they're in your heart, you know, we're still thinking of them. It's literally deciding when you have the headspace to mourn, and the recognition of, you know, now I have this headspace to acknowledge without it completely breaking me. And I think that it would be really interesting to hear you talk with Nicole Spindler. Do you remember?
I was just thinking that.
Nicole Spindler, because
Yeah.
she wrote a memoir and then a kind of a new age fiction
Yeah.
book. And in both of them, themes in both of them are grief. And
Yeah.
she lost her father just about a year ago.
Yeah.
And I think it would be really interesting to hear how you two think about grief in a way that makes it more livable, like, and not something that you either avoid or you address. It's something, I think that's a key thing that I kept picking up in your book, is how many things we get to actually choose. We get to choose if we have the headspace to discuss these things, or we get to choose if we need 10 minutes of meditation. And I think that that's a huge thing when you're talking about that mind body spirit connectivity, is just looking for more of those reminders that we really get to choose how we live, how we feel, and how we experience the earth. And I think that you really connect those three really well.
Thank you.
And that's something that I think, you know, people need to really consider when reading your book. You even say, you know, I'm not trying to convert you to a certain belief system or, you know, into a certain religion. You're simply sharing your experiences and inviting them to consider, you know, mind, body, soul connection, spirit, and all these things. And, you know, maybe consider that the weirdness in them or the quirk is a spiritual gift.
Yeah.
So that's why, you know, I want people to realize that it's not just people who are already spiritually woke, so to say. It's people looking for that healing journey, or really any part of your journey that you're on, because the book really does cover so many different aspects of life that, like, you know, as we said earlier, that there really is something in here for everyone. It's not just, like you said, it's not just about grief. It's not a grief memoir.
No, there's whole sections of this book where I was just like laughing my ass off.
Yeah.
So it's funny. It's sometimes some chapters just felt like a big hug, and I was like, thank you.
Yeah, you know, you really do have a voice that is very readable, I should say.
That's what I was saying when I said accessible.
Because see, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, I don't like, some people who read fiction don't want to try nonfiction because they're like, I don't want a bunch of statistics or something, like, you know, really boring. But I had moments where I was laughing out loud. I had moments where I had tears in my eyes. I had moments where I was like, Haley, come read this part right now. Like, so it's almost kind of how I felt when I read Jeanette McCurdy's, you know, I'm Glad My Mom Died. Have you read that?
I haven't read that one. Yeah.
Like she has a bit of a dark humor, but she also has a way of lightening things, like kind of like taking some of the weight away. And I feel like that's what you do, is you just have that effect on your readers. And so one of the questions we received is, have you had any books or any authors that have made you feel that way?
Yeah. So again, you know, there's that sense of like, this was my individual journey, and then there's also that collective or universal experience. So for me, because I was so deep in my grief and in my process of losing my mom, and, you know, trying to figure out when I was 25 how to be an adult and live and pick up the pieces and all, you know, all of that, is that I was actually not open to or interested in hearing other people's grief stories. So sometimes people would well-meaningly give me a book, you know, and I would just get so angry because I was like, no, like, I'm not interested. You don't understand. I do not want to read this right now. And I think other people, because I'm actually part of a grief group that's really wonderful, that's peer led, and it's not like a therapy thing. It's just like we're all getting through together. And in that space, there are people in that group who love like ingesting information and reading and listening to podcasts and hearing, you know, tips and tools and all that. And you could not have gotten me further away from that if you had tried. So, but one of the books that I did read about grief that was really helpful for me is by Nora McInerney, and her book is called Hot Young Widows Club, and it's wonderful, and it's very sassy, and it's like, it's good. It's good, and it's short, and she also has a couple of TED Talks that are wonderful. One of them, I don't remember the exact title, but something about like grief isn't about getting over it, it's about getting through it, you know, that kind of thing. So I think for me, like grief, one of the pieces I talk about really openly is how big comedy has been like an influence in my life since then. And comedy was always a part of my life growing up. Like we just watched comedians and liked that kind of thing in our house. But as getting through like my mom's illness, and then after she passed, like comedy, I will say I'm like a self-proclaimed comedy nerd, and I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts, and I like read stuff and follow people and go on their journey and learn, you know. But the people that I resonate the most with are often either people who have been through really hard shit and like heaviness, or they have like a spiritual contemplative bent and are integrating that, because I think, you know, so much of it is like this either or paradigm, where so much of what I talk about and that you're both picking up on is the integration. Like, how is this all just sort of folding in together into our being and how we live in the world?
Yeah, and so that's why I really think fans like, or readers of
fans, we're already fans.
Yeah, readers of I was gonna say fans or readers of Jennette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died.
Yeah.
But also, you know, I think one of the other reasons I find your voice so kind of comforting and relatable at the same times and comical is it kind of reminded me a little bit also of Molly Shannon's memoir. Not that the story aligns perfectly or anything like that. I just meant just kind of her what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like just the way she presents herself, and the way she can laugh at things, the way she kind of turns so many things into comedy things. But there's so many things where let me say things again. Your mom would be so
things is important. Yes.
But it's because I'm
my little editor ear. I was like, thanks.
Okay, I had a point to this, but just how, you know, Molly Shannon, a lot of people don't realize, you know, she lost her sister and her mom in a car accident at a very young age, and she kind of got through comedy to help her cope with everything. She started acting in classes because she wanted to pretend to be somebody else, but then she realized she had the most fun when she was laughing. She's like, a lot of people, you know, expected me to be crying or miserable, and she said, you know, she was at times, but her way of coping with it and getting through it was laughter. And I think that's a huge thing of kind of the theme of your book, is not just with the grief chapters, but so many things, how you say that it's not just, where did my brain go?
Can I step in?
You know where I'm going with this?
It's almost like life isn't something to just survive. Like,
yes,
even during the hard part.
That's what I was trying to say, is like how one of the main themes of your book is that, you know, grief and your spirituality and having, you know, lesbian moms, that's not entirely your identity, but they are identifying factors, and they are, in a way, some of them might be your spiritual gifts, you know, some of them, or some of them might be heightened or exemplified by other spiritual gifts. So I think that's another, like, really also an admirable thing, is that that's how you chose to cope with your grief.
Yeah.
So I'm so sorry I went on a circle, because
no. I can pick it up too. I'm good.
Yeah, it's all from the writer.
It's also, I think a huge part of it is I'm so used to being around Haley, who I can, you know, talk in gibberish and not make entire sense. And she'll be like, can I interject? Like she just did. And she'll be like, go finish my sentence. Yeah. So I was kind of like, yes. So sometimes Haley's my lifeline, because my brain,
totally understand.
She's, you know, calm and collected. And I'm like, what are we doing?
It takes both, you know, that's part of it. Yeah, I mean, so there's two things that come to mind with that. One is, yes, this like tone. It's interesting because that's something that people, like my early developmental editor commented on, and in my writing, there was like they do kind of a critique of each chapter or section and kind of check off these different pieces. And one of the things she said is like, oh, you have no problem with your voice. Like that's there. Yeah. And that's always, that's really cool to me. Like, I'm like, yay. Yeah. But also that's like something that I'm attracted to when I read as a reader, that I'll be like, oh, I like that author's voice. I like the way they're expressing something, and it's less about the content and more about how they're expressing it, right? So there's this piece of like, I am very, I don't know if this came across in the book, but pretty like anti-toxic positivity. Like, I'm not a like, oh, there's a gift in every crevice and there's, you know, like whatever, like find the light in the darkness. Honestly, like that's been one of, I would say, like my perspectives or issues, depends on how you want to see it, for the past many years, is just the sense of like me questioning, oh, have I just been too sad? Have I just been too, you know, whatever, that that question of, oh, I can't contribute to the world if I'm too this, too, and so many of us have that, right? Too sensitive, too loud, too whatever that is. And I think for me, there's always coming back to that both and of our wholeness. And so interpreting grief that also has lightness and laughter and some form of like, well, you do have to get through it. And so like, there's a moment, I don't think that I write this in the book. At this point, it's kind of hard to collect everything that is inside of the book, because to be honest, and I know y'all know this, that I actually wrote over 100,000 words for the first draft, and the current book is just under 60,000. So almost half of the book was cut. So it's also there are these pieces that I have to check in with myself and be like, did that make it? Did that not? But this quick story of, there was a moment where after like 3 sleepless nights, and we were in the hospice facility. And so that was also like a total pivot. I didn't know that that was going to happen. We really wanted to go home, and there were lots of reasons that didn't come to pass. But being in that facility ended up being a really beautiful and really held experience by the hospice workers and the nurses and everybody who was there. And it was like at the point of pure exhaustion and losing her mind and being like, oh my God, we just have to get through this. And there's no end in sight, or is there an end in sight? And that's sad and hard. And, you know, kind of all of these different pieces that somehow, again, like in that time in my life, I don't remember every single detail of what was happening, but somebody showed up with a bottle of tequila. And so me and my best friend and my other mom and a friend of the family who was doing a lot of caretaking with us, the 4 of us stood at the base of mom's bed and did a shot of tequila with like, you know, little hospital, whatever, glasses or paper or something. Like, it was so ridiculous. And it was like, you just at some point have to be like, wow, this is where we are right now. And like, it's ridiculous and it's beautiful and it's horrible all at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the things that makes it so relatable. You, in a much better sense, you can say things like, you know, the situation sucks right now. You know, it's okay to recognize that it sucks. And that's one thing that I think is so refreshing about you, is because there are so many like self-help books out there, even memoirs or grief memoirs or anything on spirituality, and it's just like, nothing is ever a mistake, or nothing is ever a bad occurrence, and
or everything's a learning opportunity.
Yeah, and you're just like,
sometimes it's real bad. It's just not fun.
It's just not good. I need tequila.
Yeah, and so I think that's one thing that also makes your book really relatable, is just, you know, you kind of do have those comical moments, because you're just like,
you let shit suck. Shit sucks, you let it suck.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think so much of stuff around grief, or even whatever we're going through, whenever it's a like hardship in life, is this sense of like, we have to get out of it, we have to bypass it. And that's a big part, as you've read, of like, for me, taking a pause, taking a breath, getting in touch with the body, seeing what's really going on, and then making that choice of like, oh, I actually don't want to be present for this, so I am going to distract myself and peace out and watch a movie. Or, oh my gosh, this is really hard and I need to like be with this for a moment, you know? So all of that is true. And I just, I'm pretty tired of reading and seeing so many posts and stuff that's just the like, it's like, I don't know, just whitewashing the experience that you're having to have a better one. And I think that for a while I didn't know how to express it in a way that would serve others, but was serving me so much to just be like, this is really hard. And the truth is that like our society isn't taught how to grieve or how to support people who are grieving. And so there are not a ton of people in our lives who will sit with us and be like, you're right, this does really suck right now.
Yeah.
So,
And there's one chapter that I've read in your book that really explores and is beautifully explained, by the way, just simple meditation techniques that I wish more people would do before they react. Because as somebody, I've personally only been meditating for about a year, and I wish I would have started it so much sooner. I noticed how much less added stress I have in my life after I spend a couple minutes, returning to self, considering how I'm feeling in the moment, and considering how this is going to make me feel moments later, not in a stressful way, but as in a, what do I need? What does my body need? What does my self need? And I think that that's a really powerful part in your book, is it does help any level of meditator how to really check in with yourself, and it really teaches you the importance of doing so. There are many benefits to it.
And I think that's kind of what I was talking about, where I said your book kind of helps readers see opportunities, and these opportunities to see that we have choices.
Yeah.
So like you said, I don't really have the space to feel this right now. I'm just going to go watch a movie. Or this is where we're at. I need some tequila. And I think that for some reason, maybe it's productivity. Maybe it's, I don't know. But I think there's this idea that when we have a problem, or not even a problem, just like anything that affects like where we call ground zero, we think you either attack it really quickly, you freeze and do nothing, and then there's shame. And it's like we only associate these almost like, the fight or flight, freeze, or, you do nothing, and there's all that shame. And it's like we don't even allow ourselves to say, I need to go just watch a movie for a minute, something like that. And I think your book serves as a reminder, that we not only are allowed, but for our health need those little spaces and those moments. And I felt like as I read it, you created that space for me. So I think that that's something really powerful that readers will experience when they pick up your book, Spiritually Parented. Spiritually Parented.
Right.
There one more time in case you hopped on late.
I just want to tell everyone that after this live, I will be putting the link to Spiritually Parented, which is now available.
Yes.
On Amazon. It's also on Kindle. So I have the ebook because I just couldn't wait for the paperback. But I will be getting a paperback as well. Hopefully a signed one.
Yes. Okay. So last question, and then we'll get you out of here. I'll let you go.
Okay.
So thinking about how, and I actually did know this because I won't say how, but I have a little access into some of Meg's writing.
Oh.
So,
yes.
But she is aware, by the way.
Yeah.
But anyway,
We pulled off the biggest heist.
yeah.
Into the vault.
Yeah, right. The other 40% of the manuscript. Meg's version. Yeah. So that's good marketing. Meg's version. So do you just with that in mind, thinking about the other 40,000 words, if I'm doing that math correctly, do you see yourself continuing your journey as an author? Like, can we expect more books like this from you? Are you curious or interested in taking things like another route? Like I said, maybe doing like a fiction novel, or where do you see yourself going after, publishing this book?
Yeah. Okay. So the short version is I have no idea, and it will be just as much a surprise to me as it is to anybody else. And secondly, I think originally, when I shared literally cutting almost half the book to create this, people were like, well, great, then you already have book 2, or you have part 2. And I think there's like a yes, and there is a part of stepping back and kind of distilling and wanting to see what wants to happen next. I also have known for a really long time that I really want to write and be a writer. Like I really want to make a living as an author, and I don't totally know what that journey looks like yet. And part of it is shifting out of the one-on-one focus of having worked as a coach for 10 years now and working with folks one-on-one. And one of the most immediate next steps is I'm actually going to teach a workshop, the first workshop I'm doing in like 2 years. is September 3rd, that I will send you all details
3rd.
too, right?
Yeah.
But it is about how you and other readers and, you know, anybody who's interested can take their own spiritual writing journey, because I know that part of what I bring to the world and also that I enjoyed in this process is exploring what embodied writing means to me and how to help others through that. And even as I'm talking, you can see my hands moving a lot, right? One of the things that I really enjoy is doing exercises and actual like practical techniques to get people in their body so that the writing is easier and that it comes through you rather than like searching for these things outside of us.
That's what feels so daunting sometimes.
Oh yeah, especially when you like, I mean, any creative of any genre has this where like we have these ideas but we don't know how to like pull them down, you know, and like make them real, right? So it's almost the like balloon thread that we have to like connect and find.
It's like, which one?
I'm not, because like, you know, I was like, I don't know.
You've lived with me.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just, you know, it's kind of funny because, you know, I have to admit, you know, there were times in high school when Haley was blonde, we would switch places in class, and Haley would go get some of my papers started for me, and I realize now it was not good, but I would sit there for 3 hours, and I felt like the episode of SpongeBob when he's like, I'm doing it, and it's just like, like that's me. Like I would just sit at the computer for hours, and I would be like, have nothing. So the fact that you guys are able to, you know, create these stories or share your experiences and connect to readers, is, as a reader myself, is just always, I just really appreciate authors who can speak in a voice that is entertaining and but also you're learning something and having fun while you're doing it.
And it's so heartfelt too.
Yeah,
like the point that I don't say this because I know that for some people they don't work and give them anxiety, but weighted blankets work very well for me, and that's how I felt reading your book. So I felt like I had a little spirited blanket, or spirited blanket.
Spirited blanket. That's our merch line.
Yeah, spirited blanket.
But yeah, so that's kind of, she picked up my twin because I was rambling. My twin moment, she saved me, is what I was trying to say is, yes, it's just you feel like sometimes you're talking with a close friend,
right?
And that's what's, I mean, like I said, I will admit I've not finished the book. I'm reading it chapters, but it's also kind of because I feel like kind of what we said earlier, each chapter is a dose of self-care every day for me. So sometimes it's kind of like, okay, how am I going to utilize today, or how am I going to slowly start practicing this a little bit more? And I have noticed ever since I've been reading your meditation chapter, you know, maybe we had a frustrating moment with something, and I'm just like, okay, what do I need? Do I need to resolve this right away, or do I need to think on it?
I think it's made even our daily interactions with one another better. Like seriously, I really think that it's just, you just realize how when you're trying to sit there and check in with yourself spiritually, and you're trying to think of, you know, where you're at in your healing, where you might need some reparenting and things like that, you start to consider other people as well, and it makes me see the other person on the other side. So I mean, we're roommates, and it could be something I'm like, oh, like why would she do that? And now I'm like, oh, she does that because of XYZ.
And I think that's, you know, you mentioned in the author's note that this can be for people who have children, people who don't have children, people, you know, so that's why I think it is kind of so refreshing that you do that, because it could be also helpful to, you know, like she said, like, you know, roommates like her and I, you know, a sister relationship. But imagine, like, I can only like imagine how different so many childhoods would be if parents would also do the same thing, if they would consider, oh, they ran and fell because they, you know, they weren't thinking about that, hey, that the grass is wet, or because they were curious about something else. So, you know, it's just, you're like, okay, well, they don't know. Their eyes are focused on something because they want to climb the tree or something like that. You know, if parents just, I think sometimes had these little more just tools. It's almost like a toolkit in a way, in their brain, I think.
Did you see that? We came upon that word together. We're like, cool.
I'm giving some empathy in that space. No, I love that. And I think, like, again, I would totally be open to writing a fiction book. I think that would be fun. That's also like, there are all these things that I've wanted to do for a long time that are now starting to funnel in.
Right.
So that's why I'm like, yeah, no, there's approximately 4 books that are all ideas,
Yeah.
you know. So, and I'm like, holy crap, this moment, like this one is real, this one is complete, which is also wild to be like, it is whole, it is done, it is going into people's hands, it is, you know.
Top new release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, top new release, baby. Yeah, so it's like the excitement of honoring and acknowledging that this is also going to start to live a different life outside of me, which I know is like kind of part of the author journey that you can't anticipate, because I know there's some other authors on this call. It's just this sense of, I've been working on so much of this in relative isolation or in my own experience, and then to hand it to somebody, and even with the people who are friends and family who are reading it right now, or started reading the ebook a couple weeks ago when it came out, there's that sense of like they're having their own thoughts and feelings, and that is just like, I'm like, oh yeah, that's part of this too, is like the point of this is that it will live outside of and beyond me. And the best, like hearing you say it's like a weighted blanket or a hug or a piece of self-care, and like there was someone who wrote to me and said like, I'm reading it, but I'm reading it slowly. Like that doesn't surprise me at all, that people are taking it slow and are processing and sitting with and being with, and that's like totally fine for me. That's not something that needs to be rushed. And the other piece of it is like, I can do this because it is this physical copy. It's like, it feels to me like I'm literally handing over 10 years of healing work. Like this has been extensive. And so to like hand it over and be like, now it's your turn, I really mean that. Like this is cool to be like, it is going to be integrated in different ways through people's filters, and what does reparenting mean to you is going to be really different than what it means to somebody else. So that's the kind of next part of the author journey that I'm excited about, and also like, oh gosh, people are going to have feelings.
That's amazing. I'm sure you have, but have you ever heard the song All I Know So Far by Pink?
Tell me more.
So Pink has a song, it's called All I Know So Far, and it's like her kind of talking to her children, and she's kind of giving them advice on like, it's okay to be angry, especially if you're angry because you think something is wrong, and you know you're standing up for the right, and being kind of weird.
She said that, and there's this lyric that really resonates with me when she says, I wish someone would have told me that this darkness comes and goes. So like she just has kind of like, just it's such like an upbeat song, and you're just kind of like, wow.
And then at the end she's like, or the chorus is, it's like, that's all I know so far. And so that's kind of how I feel. So like with you working on this book, you know, for the past, what you said, 10 years. So 10 years this book has been coming, Spiritually Parented. And that's what it feels like. It's like, you know, your childhood, what you've kind of learned like on your own spiritual journey, and then you're passing that on to readers. So when you said you're handing it over and you're kind of like, it's your turn now, that song immediately came up for me. So Spiritually Parented, out on Amazon as a top new release.
Yes, paperback and Kindle are now available.
Yes.
But yeah, that's so cool, because earlier I asked Haley, I said, this picture, I feel like I see Meg here. I was like,
is that Meg? And then she's like, no, it's probably a stock photo. And then she goes,
oh no,
I think it's Meg.
I was like, no, this is a really good photo. I was like, if it's not them, it's like a photography photo.
Yeah, it's
my other mom took it, so it's also like our family.
Because I even said to Haley, I was like, I feel like they look alike.
Nikki said, I hugely recommend this read.
Nikki is one of our favorites.
Yeah, when we were referring to a couple of the questions, we did ask one of Nikki's, which was, I'm trying to remember which one it was exactly.
I think we asked quite a few of Nikki's, but we also, Haley and I, because we're reading it, kind of were like, oh, Nikki liked this part, so did we.
So we combined some questions with Nikki too. So it was so much fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Everyone, go check out Spiritually Parented. We will keep you updated on Meg's workshops that she's going to be doing, give you some details on that. You can also follow her right here on Instagram. She is tagged above. and definitely check out Spiritually Parented.
We will put the link in our bio. Meg, is there anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
I'm just excited that this moment is here, and even like Nikki, seeing your name, and I've seen some other folks pop in and out, just to say hi. And I'm so grateful that you've made time and space to read it, because it does really mean a lot. So
Yeah, thank you for giving us this story, honestly,
Yeah.
or your stories. It is, like Nikki said, it is something that I feel like everyone needs. You know, it's very refreshing. It's a hug. It is a hug. It's self-care.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
taking the time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.